because I'm very low output right now. I feel like an 80-year-old woman sometimes. I'm in my house all the time. Like my big event is the grocery store. Like when I go out to get the Publix, I'm really psyched about it, so I do have to follow your lead and get more low intensity activity. And just as an upstanding health professional, I should be doing it, because how can I preach it if I don't really practice it? But I have the lazy man's approach to getting lean. So I'd rather just slash calories than do more work.
We're live. Well, we're live. You're listening to this on some sort of a tape to welcome to the Iron Road. I'm your host, Eric Prush, with my dear co-host, Mr. Ian DiGiacomo. And, as we record this, the world is going to hell. Everything is totally insane. And we endeavor to give you, I guess you could say, a 60 to 90, maybe even 120-minute escape from the insanity that is Western civilization here today. So, I won't lie. I've been profoundly affected by the things that have been in the news recently, and it's definitely affected my ability to do some stuff, but nothing could keep me from coming to do this show, Ian. So how are you doing today, my friend?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. It was very disturbing, this past week's events. But again, like he said, it's an escape. I love this podcast. I love our chats, and we get to unplug a little bit from the harsh reality that can be daily life. But I'm having a dilemma that I want you to help me with.
Boy.
So we have a lot of expertise that overlaps, but I've heard you say in the past that you prepare your rice in mass beforehand in the week.
Mass.
Okay. My issue, my dilemma here, the rice dilemma, is I usually have a rice cooker. I prepare each batch for each meal. So it comes out fresh. It's nice. It's hot. It's all good. When I store it in the fridge for one day, it becomes pebbles, like complete rocks, and it's unrevivable, and it's like impossible to eat because it's just like you're eating sand at that point. So what do you add to your rice that makes it last for days and days? Because I cook chicken, I cook vegetables, and that all lasts for like 7 days in the fridge. And it makes my meal prep very convenient because I can just pull everything out of the fridge, divvy out what I need, and go to work. So what is your secret for creating long-lasting rice, longevity in your rice?
I'll just tell you exactly what I do. I have long grain white rice. I always add in twice as many cups of water as cups of rice. So I usually cook 6 cups of rice each sitting. Okay. Sometimes 5. Okay. Which means 12 cups of water. I bring the water to a boil, of course, with the top on the old pot. Once it's boiling, I dump the rice in. I turn it down to a simmer. I let it cook only for about 15 minutes. Then I turn the heat off, okay? And I let it sit for like 45 to 60 minutes, okay? That keeps it relatively soft so that it does not turn into pebbles. You've got about a 3-day window for the pebbles, okay, at that point. I don't know if it's because I'm undercooking it or overcooking it or whatever. I will say that there have been some times when I popped that rice container open and it smelled like death, and I was like, I'm not eating this, and I had to throw it out. I mean, it is what it is, okay? And I don't generally, which is interesting, I don't generally have that problem with protein sources. I don't know if it's because I go through them quicker or they just keep differently. I mean, I really have no idea, but I used to add a whole bunch of spices or whatever to the rice. And I found that it tasted really good in the moment, but then when it would be in the freezer, for whatever reason, it smelled so foul. It was like garlic, salt, paprika, I think, some other stuff. So finally I was like, I'm adding hot sauce to this and salt after the fact. So
Sure.
Who cares? It doesn't matter, So finally I just started doing that. I'd say you can get 3 to 4 days out of the rice, depending on your rice standards. If they're really low, you can get 4, maybe 5. Okay. If they're high, you're going to get about 3. You just have to figure out how much you need, what's going to carry you over from sitting to sitting.
So extra water, you think, would be the most important factor, with more water than called for. So maybe it saturates it a little more and keeps it moist for longer. It doesn't dry out.
When you turn that heat off, okay, the rice is still going to mostly be underwater, and it's going to mess with you. Okay. That's why you have to keep the top closed. It obviously will contain the heat. Okay. And then 45 to 60 minutes later, you pop that thing open, you put it in storage. It's definitely like softer. And it seems to keep a little bit better, especially upon reheating. Now, again, after that like 3-day window, you'll see it get like a little bit more like gnarly. You know what I mean? But that's all food. It's all like we know. There's going to be window in all of it. Yeah. But I would say that that's probably your sweet spot. I don't know how much water you're adding, but I've never used a rice cooker. I've only ever either used like the vintage Trader Joe's single serving bags, or the every young meathead with no time or culinary experience swears by those things, or just the giant pot. That's always kind of those have been my two systems. So that would be my suggestion. I think that's the winning formula for you.
That's fair. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that, because my meal prep lately, I've been dieting down. I've been trying to lose some body fat lately, just get a little tighter, and everything's going really well. My portions are dialed in. My food scale is my best friend, but the rice thing, I just have to make the batch every single time, which takes, it doesn't take that long. I pour the dry rice in, I measure it dry, so I know exactly how much I'm getting. Then I rinse the hell out of it, so I get all the, the gunk off of it, all the impurities. And then I'll put in enough water for it to cook. I can eyeball the water now in the rice cooker at this point. And 15 minutes later, you have perfect rice. So it eliminates the need to, I think I screwed up a lot in the past with rice in the pot, and I kept messing it up, and I just got frustrated, because I guess you have to get the timing down. You have to get the right ratio of water to rice.
Cups.
So 2 cups to 1 cup.
That's what
2 to 1
for.
ratio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's generally been my sweet spot. I do that, I say once every 5 days or something,
Okay.
Like
Fair
right
enough.
now, my training is so out of control, like in a good way. Like, I've been doing so much conditioning work, and I'm fortunate and unfortunate that I have the type of genetics where I could, once I have attained a certain body fat, if long as I'm burning some calories, doesn't matter what I eat, I'll stay the same. If I want to change, obviously I would have to eat cleaner or something, but I'm already pretty lean right now, and I'm just doing so much conditioning work and lifting just once or twice a week that I am starving, like 24/7, like that. Like the food is just going right through you, like that type of hunger, like where it's almost like your body's just telling you, like, listen, we need all hands on deck, like we need everything right now. Like there have been some times, like yesterday, we had a really hard training session at my academy. I did more rounds than I would normally do. And dude, I had packed like some Vitargo with the protein shake, got in my car, crushed that, and it felt like I was still going to go into like a diabetic coma. Like I was so hungry. I went to this place called Hummus Fit, which is right by the academy. I bought these things called Buffin muffins. They're like these protein muffins that are actually delicious. The 7-Eleven by where you used to live, used to carry them, and they stopped carrying them, which was just a heartbreaking day. I walked in there. They had a fridge full of them. I saw the 2 flavors. Well, I like more than 2 flavors, but they had a mass stock of 2 of my favorite flavors. I just walked up to the counter with like I was holding a fucking Atlas Stone, and I just put it down, and I was like, go check the back. Like, I want it all. This is not enough. Like, I want all of this. And on the way home, I'm on the Northern State Parkway, just like housing Buffin muffins. I got home, I was still hungry. Walked my dog, almost started getting the sugar shakes, and then I had like there's a grocery store nearby where I live now called Wild Fork, which is like amazing. They sell like
been there,
all meat.
Been there.
It's amazing, but they also sell some other
meats.
Yes, for exceptionally good prices, might I say.
Okay,
and they have these really good like pizzas in there, like these personal pan pizzas, and they've got like a Sicilian one. It takes like 25 minutes to cook in your oven, and I just cooked it, ate the whole thing. It's got to be like 2,400 calories in that thing, just to the face. Yeah, I was starving. Like, I just could not get enough food, and I woke up the next day, I looked great. But it was hard training. I mean, it was, an hour and a half of grappling, and I do so much low-intensity work that it's just always there. So much walking, so much conditioning work. So my goal is to get my resting heart rate down into the 50s. I came in as low as 60 last week, which is like a recent PR for me, but it's crazy. I'm like patting myself on the back, and then my training partners are like, yeah, mine's 45 beats per minute. Like, what?
Well, are they smaller than you?
Some of them, yes.
Okay.
Others, freaks. Just freaks.
Fair enough. I do feel like you and I are very similar in certain ways, but you have the conditioning and all that metabolic output with the grappling and the, your weight training. Well, I do the weight training too, but with the low intensity walking and all that stuff that I don't have. So I'm curious to compare our daily carb intake because you've always been a carb furnace, and you've always told me how much I know. So how many carbs a day do you take in grams? And I'll tell you, you tell me yours and I'll tell you mine. So we can kind of compare, because I'm very low output right now. I feel like an 80-year-old woman sometimes. I'm in my house all the time. Like my big event is the grocery store. Like when I go out to get the Publix, I'm really psyched about it, so I do have to follow your lead and get more low intensity activity. And just as an upstanding health professional, I should be doing it, because how can I preach it if I don't really practice it? But I have the lazy man's approach to getting lean. So I'd rather just slash calories than do more work. So I'm going to do all this muscle retention, muscle building work to get my physique right. But then I'd rather just take away from my diet and suffer that way instead of
Well, yeah, but we have different hobbies. Like, for grappling, you have to go do the sport. You know what I mean? And that's all metabolic output stuff. I mean, dude, like, I don't think that there's a day, and this is like a low end, like a day that I train, it can't ever be lower than 300 grams of carbs.
Okay.
Ever. And I have to push it sometimes to get it, say, over 500-600. I have been there routinely, when I was a little bit more strict with it. I'm still working with Justin, but when I was a little more strict with it, like my high carb days they were insane. It was like 160 grams of carbs, like every meal for like 6 meals.
Wow.
It was madness. Like,
you're an outlier. That's like even a very active person could not tolerate all that. You're a large person. You have a lot of muscle, and you do all this work. So you're an outlier in that way.
I've always had a fast metabolism. Like,
so genetically, you have an advantage as well.
No question.
Okay.
I always thought that I had, and I'm not saying I have good genetics for this, but I always thought that I had like the worst genetics ever for bodybuilding. And then through working with Justin, I realized that like they were way less bad than I thought. When you start to realize that bodybuilding is more of a fat loss contest than it is a muscle building contest. Like, you have a guy like, for example, like Mike Israetel, who has great genetics for muscle growth, but just can't get lean. Can't.
I mean, he doesn't really compete in bodybuilding very often. He says he's a competitive bodybuilder, but he doesn't. I think his focus, like you now, is more grappling, and that's what he speaks to on a lot of his content. Is he's doing grappling. He's really into jiu-jitsu. So I don't know if he's like a really serious competitive bodybuilder. I think he does it to maintain his reputation and status. And does he have a pro card?
No.
Okay.
Not even close. Okay. Yeah, not even close. Yeah.
Yeah. He's very heavily muscled, but like you said, he doesn't look super, super lean all the time.
And the other thing that I had learned, so basically a fast metabolism is actually an asset in bodybuilding because it makes the show, like dieting for the show, easier because you don't have to starve yourself as much. So yeah, it makes the off season more challenging, but you can eat way more food pre-contest, so it doesn't kill you as much getting ready for the show. Also, I've always noticed, like, this is a weird thing, but like they say what separates like the guys that, and by the way, I'm in no way saying that I could win the Olympia. That's a preposterous statement.
That's
I want to get it out there right now.
Yeah.
Okay, obviously. Okay, but
thanks for clearing that up.
But someone might listen to this and be like, this guy's a douchebag, and I am, but for a host of different reasons.
For different reasons. Yeah, we'll get to that.
But like a lot of times, what seems to separate like elite bodybuilders from the guys that are very good, it seems like a lot of guys have good, and maybe it's through genetics or just through how they like to train. They have good beach muscles, a good upper body from the front, but legs and back, you see a lot of guys like you look at guys, for example, in the 90s. This is the example that I always think of, and you'd see someone standing next to Dorian Yates, and you'd be like, "Wow, like I think he's almost kind of got Dorian there," and then they turn around and it's game over. Like Dorian's, and for most of the great Mr. Olympias, Ronnie Coleman, same way. It's just the back and leg development seems to be what separates a lot of the guys who win from the guys who were just there. And I've always had the worst genetics for like that the beach muscle area of my body. But my back and legs have always been the body parts that grow the most. Now, part of it is I'm a sick bastard, and the more something hurts, the better I'll do at it.
Okay.
Like, I'm the kind of guy that will barely pass algebra, but will ace calculus too. It's like, if it's hard, I'll do way better. If it's easy, I'm like, whatever. Doing arms, I'm like, this is fucking boring. But when that pain from the leg or back training hits it, I'm like, let's go. So
psychologically, you lean into the challenge. You want to lean into a challenge,
I think so.
Basically.
I think so. But yeah, those are so, it's funny, like those body parts. And when I diet, the first parts that always shrink are like my biceps and to a certain extent my chest, where my back and legs are like always, but when it seems to be what I gain muscle there, it just stays there. Like, it's just like,
nice. It's a gift.
It's crazy. Yeah. Like it's funny, but like there's another life where I'd be curious if I got into bodybuilding at say 15 or 16 and put in like a good 20 years of like discipline training. I'd be curious to know what I would have looked like.
That would be cool. To rewind the clock and do it differently and take different paths, like a video game. Like you can restart it and take path A or path B. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's just like, but that lifestyle, it's hard to be a person in society sometimes when you're that much of a bodybuilder, because you really can't go to dinner. You can't like be social like that because it's so strict sometimes, especially during like cut phases and during contest prep, that it puts a damper on your social life. So you can't be a social creature. You have to be an introvert, I'd say. I don't consider you an introvert by any means.
For sure.
So yeah, it's a whole different life, but it would be cool. It'd be cool to see your potential. Let's put it that way, because you are very lean naturally. Classic physique. Yeah.
That's like the other thing with classic is like, you look at like Chris Bumstead as an example. When he has his shirt on, he actually looks like a normal human. You know, like he doesn't look like a freakazoid. I used to always laugh. Back when we were kids in the 90s, they would do these press conferences for the Olympia, and they would make the competitors wear like suits.
Dude, I know.
And they look like freaks. Like, it was like whoever came up with this idea must hate these people, right? Like this is like, could you imagine like you're like being Marcus Rule has to go get fitted for a suit? Like, first of all, like he's never going to wear that again. He's wearing that once. He probably got married in a tank top. Like his wife is a house anyway.
A tuxedo vest.
Yeah, like, exactly. His wife is a house anyway. Like, so they're both into training. So maybe outlier example, but like you see them just like walking up, and it's like there's just so much fabric, and it's not fitted like tight to their body. So it's like they're swimming in fabric, and it just looks like ridiculous. You're like this was mean. They should have just let you wear a t-shirt. Like, this was mean.
Part of the reason for that, though, is the style back then was more of a boxy suit, even for a normal human being. Like, if you were a Wall Street guy, it wasn't like a tailored, fitted suit with like skinny legs, like slim, tight leg pants. It was boxy. So you put boxy on those builds, and it looks comical. It really does look comical.
But you know the exact footage I'm talking about, where they're like,
I do.
Like walking into the venue, and you just see it. You're just like, this is, I mean, what the hell are you doing to these poor guys? Like, I mean, come on. Like, and you wonder, like, how much do they spend on that? Like, when you go to a tailor and you're like Marcus Rule walks into a tailor and is like, I need a suit. Like, does he laugh at you? Or is he like $10,000 minimum? Like minimum? Like, what? Like,
is it more work? Is it really that much more work for them to do, do you think? Or is it just like proportions they've never seen before?
It has to be custom made to their body.
Fair enough. Yeah.
People were less fat back then, so there wasn't just like that much fabric laying around, you know what I mean? On one suit. It's just like you show up and like they're probably like, all right, well, like we have to literally, like, someone has to hand make this. Like, this is
industrial spools of fabric.
Yeah. For some gorilla to wear like for 4 hours.
Half an hour.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just mean. It's just mean.
More recently, they put them into like track suits, like Olympians, like what they wear in like a press conference. This is like a zip up, like a windbreaker track suit. That's
way better.
That's reasonable and appropriate for the industry and for the for the sport.
Way better.
There's no reason to have cartoon suits on.
It's preposterous, dude.
Let me ask you, dude. So, what do you train to music wise? I've been kind of getting stale and stuck in a lot of my my music. When I was younger, I would train to very angry rock, like very, when I was like 15 to 25, the heavier, the harder, the better. More screaming, the more anger, the more angry tones. But now I find that I can't always listen to that. And it kind of like, sometimes it'll psych me up. When I was powerlifting, I needed it for like the mindset and to like go to war. But right now with bodybuilding, sometimes I just need like a rhythm. I need like just a continuous pace and beat and tempo to keep me on track. What do you listen to when you train?
When I'm grappling, I prefer electronic music because I feel like it helps me get into like a flow state. But reality is, for martial arts, if I'm in a good mood, generally I will be more creative and I'll be less stiff and I'll have a better session. So anything that makes me happy, but tends to not be as much metal, I don't listen to any music when I train anymore. I only listen to podcasts. Sometimes if I'm doing like a really, really hard conditioning workout, I might put some music on, but generally I just put on a show or I put on a podcast, and I try to almost be, especially for conditioning, almost more like a metronome. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing like some like lactate threshold rounds the other day, some conditioning on the Stairmaster, and probably was a stupid decision on my part because in that exercise, the legs are going to be oftentimes a bigger limiting factor than your lungs or heart, right? Just the way that it is. So for me, it was just focusing on getting your foot on the step, just the next step. And also through martial arts, I've kind of realized like controlling your adrenaline is really, really important. And so I try to focus on controlling adrenaline while doing conditioning. And you will notice, depending on how in shape you are, there's like a 5 beats per minute swing on your heart rate if you're like gassed up and really aggressively just breathing through your mouth versus actually kind of trying to be a little bit more efficient with your breathing. And that might sound insignificant, but like the highest data I have for my heart rate is 195 beats per minute. And I definitely think there's a difference between 190 and 195. And certainly between 185 and 195 in terms of
you can feel
output.
a difference at that point.
Yeah, for sure. But also biologically, really? Like, dude, once you redline, if you take an exercise to failure, if you do a set, we used to train in your garage a couple years ago, and we were doing those like lunatic sets of like
leg press,
triple or quadruple, like, dude, once you redline it like that, dude, you're done. You're done.
It's true.
Like all you could do was like after that a couple sets of like leg extensions. I remember doing that stuff with you and then being like, I'm gonna do split squats, and you were like, you're insane. Like this, I'm just like holding on to your squat rack, like barely able to do my own body weight. So like anything that keeps you from redlining I think is beneficial. And Lance Armstrong did an appearance on the Peter Attia podcast a couple years ago, and Peter Attia actually asked like training questions because everybody wants to ask Lance like, why did you do drugs or whatever?
The controversy.
I'm fucking done with that. I want to know how he trained, And he was talking about how in competition they would wear heart rate monitors, and they were very conscious of what their red line zone was, because that pace, not only can it not be maintained, but it detracts from the rest of your racing performance, not just for that day, but for later in the race as well, since it's like an everyday event, the Tour de France, So like you'd almost take that data and use it sometimes to almost like tactically lose a stage. Like, okay, like if I redline it today and I win this stage, will I have anything left for tomorrow? And tomorrow might be a certain stage, be it a time trial, or maybe it's more in the mountains, something that fits my body type a little bit better. That's when I can really make up time. So you're trying to save your energy. But I don't know, man. I think if I got back into powerlifting, I would need the aggressive music again.
Okay. Fair enough.
Like I'm just trying to beat PRs in the record book almost always, sets of 4 to 8. That's pretty much where I live. And for conditioning, I guess I'm just trying a different experiment. I'm trying to almost just like go somewhere else, and like
free your mind and just zone out.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. That makes sense.
And dude, the reason why I bring that up is like, I was talking to one of my training partners yesterday. He was a Green Beret, Army Ranger Green Beret. He's about our age. And, we were talking about getting through that type of training, and he was like, you have to go somewhere else. If you're always jacked up, like in the moment, sometimes the stress could be too much. Like you're holding a fucking log over your head. You kind of have to be able to just like kind of relax and just go to a different place, for some of this stuff. So I think both have benefits, but I guess I'm just not at that point in my life where that's what I need. Every now and again, though, I'll go back to some of the like Rob Zombie, White Zombie is always great for lifting. Like that's great stuff. And it's almost always if I start deadlifting again. If I start deadlifting again or doing any type of heavy hinging movement, usually the aggressive music starts to kind of seep back in.
It's such a tough deadlift, is such a tough, aggressive move that you really need to be so tense all over.
Yes.
And like you said, with the whole cardio conditioning, holding a log over your head, you want to use just as much energy as you need to get that done and no more.
Yes.
Because if you have to do it for an extended period of time, you have to, you don't want to burn out. And if you only need 51% of your energy to get that done and you're giving 70 just because you think you have to, so like, even me with household stuff, I give way too much effort to like opening a jar of pickles, like where you only need so much. You don't overdo it. Like, yes. So with the endurance stuff, if you can find that rhythm, that's why I find it very fascinating about Lance Armstrong that they track their contest heart rate as a strategy. That's really cool. I never thought about that.
I'll give you a particular example. When Lance was competing, he pretty much blew everybody away almost every year that he did it. But there was one year, it was 2003, where Jan Ullrich was like right on him. And Jan Ullrich was his main rival. That year actually has like one of my favorite Lance performances where it was, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, but it was the Luz Ardennes or mountains or something like that, where he, there's actually a really cool, like, highlight of it. That actually funny. I will put this thing on if I'm doing a brutal conditioning workout. It's 15 minutes of Lance climbing this mountain, because what happens is he's going up the mountain. His bike catches a spectator's bag. He falls off the bike. Okay. The bike breaks, but he doesn't know that it's broken, and he rides a broken bike all the way up this mountain because he knew he was a better climber than Jan Ullrich. Jan Ullrich was a better sprinter. He was a stronger guy, but much, much bigger. But Lance was a big cyclist, but Jan was very muscular. And so he had to bury him in the mountains or else he might lose. Long story short, now they go into one of the time trials, and Lance he's going to lose, like the Tour de France, because Jan Ullrich is burying him in the time trial. I don't remember the exact like amount of time, but it was like per kilo. He was putting like per kilometer, he was putting like, I don't know, like 20 seconds into Lance per kilometer, which is insane. Okay. And they reference it specifically. Itia asks him, "Are you redlining?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." And the only reason he won was Jan Ullrich fell. It was pouring rain. Coming down a mountain, bike skidded out, took a nasty fall. And because it was a time trial, the etiquette is always you slow down. If someone falls, you don't try to bury them you wait for them to get back on the bike. But that's more of a regular leg. In the time trial, from what I understand, you just keep going because it's solo racing. It's not team racing on that day. So Jan Ullrich falls and winds up losing the race as a result.
Wow.
But specifically, he does reference he was monitoring his heart rate because they're like sometimes I even believe your coaches, like in the car, have the data and they're like, you got to back off.
Are they in your ear, like in an earpiece?
Yeah. You got to back off. Like you're not going to have enough left. You should not be at 185 BPM, 15 minutes into the time trial or whatever. Like it's just, you have to marshal your energy, or else you're screwed.
But what happens if you're just behind and you have to create this crazy effort to catch up, or if you're going to lose either way, if you maintain your heart rate zone, what I'm saying is there no way to overcome that? You think there's any mental, like a David Goggins, like a mental capacity where you can kind of churn through that? And are those guys so conditioned that they have the resolve to?
I think at that level they all have it, dude. I mean, you're talking about like you're basically running a marathon a day every day for 3 or 4 weeks.
Outrageous.
Like it's just it's so incredibly stressful on the body. I do think there is strategy to it. Guys will attack on stages that fit their style. Like there are some that fit sprinters. There are some that fit climbers. There are some that fit more time trial guys or whatever. So you may marshal your energy, hold back on one day, knowing that you could really do some damage to your opponent on the next day. Obviously there's drafting. You're with your team. Like certain days, if your team isn't as good, they're not fit enough, or they bonk out, they're not going to be there to pull you to the front. Like you have to have a guy to pull you to save your energy. So there's a lot of interesting kind of like things about it. Sometimes like the peloton breaks, and if you don't break with that first part of the peloton, now if you're the second half of the peloton, think of the amount of time you'd have to race solo without anyone to draft off of. It's an incredible waste of energy, so there's all sorts of different tactics. Like Lance was known for having less tension in the pedals. Like, if you ever watch him, he pioneered the style of a higher cadence but less tension in the pedals. Okay, whereas Jan Ulrich had way more tension in the pedals. So Jan had much bigger legs than Lance, and he's almost like grinding on the bike. Where Lance makes it look like he's doing it easy, he's keeping the cadence up, and that's also a strategy. Like, how is your body built? Like, what do you get the most out of? I actually think, in the case of Lance Armstrong, he developed that strategy post-cancer, because he was initially a triathlete. Like, that was his thing, okay? He was very muscular. I mean, he's swimming all the time, right? He lost a ton of weight due to cancer, okay? Got back on the bike, obviously was already a professional cyclist beforehand, and was world-class beforehand, was a legitimate world champion, but only in single-day races. He was not known for the longer tours because he was a more muscular rider, okay? When he lost the weight, I think he switched his style to a higher cadence, but with less tension on the pedals. Almost like more of an emphasis on his heart and lungs and less of an emphasis on the horsepower of the legs. So and now a lot of guys do that, by the way.
Interesting. So he kind of set a whole trend for a certain style of riding.
For sure.
Also, with the success he had, doping or no doping, I'm sure most of those guys, top 10, were doping anyway. So it evened the playing field, even though he got the most heat for it because he was the poster child for that sport, really. But that sport is always, so the Tour de France, correct me if I'm wrong, is a team sport, but usually only one person gets the credit for the win. It's a very weird thing. It's like, the team wins the Super Bowl, the quarterback is the only guy who gets credit for it. It's like a weird situation in that sport that it's team, but then an individual glory. It's a very odd dynamic.
So basically, if you're an up-and-coming rider, you want to get on a big team, and I forget the exact, I took a French word they use for it, or I forget which language. It's not English, where it means in service of. So you are in service of the main rider, and it could be anything from, like you are, they're pulling off you, I'm gonna draft off of you because you are in service to me. But it also is something as simple as, I'm in the front of the peloton, I need water. I allow myself to break all the way back to where our coaches are. I throw as much shit in my suit as I can, and I bring it up to Lance. Like, they're like literal, like it's
runners.
Yeah, literally.
In a way.
That's also a huge part of it. What they used to do in the Tour de France, and it was really cool to watch, and I would actually suggest that you watch this. I don't know if they do it anymore. One of the days was a team time trial. So the whole team would race just by themselves, right? And everyone would say start on like couple minute intervals, like the whole day. Now, obviously, it's still taking into account the single rider. So like your best guy is like, his time is getting added to the race with the whole team, let's say, if that makes sense. But it was really cool to see how seamlessly they would switch who was in front, so they never stopped blitzing forward. Like, one guy would go cut right into the wind, okay? And he might do it for 5 to 10 minutes, whatever, like full fucking blast, allow himself to drift off, and then someone else comes in. That guy goes to the back, and it's like a phalanx. They're just like broking it around these corners, like creating like a perfect like pocket of no wind resistance for the guy who is the main guy who's supposed to win the whole thing.
So being in formation is really critical then.
Absolutely.
So they must have so much practice on the pace, tempo, and like you said, changing out key players to,
for sure,
to maybe bring supplies, but also to maintain the formation, because that's a big part of the drafting, I assume, is
of course,
having
especially
a certain design in the formation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you have different guys, like some guys are sprinters. They're like more muscular. They're faster. And maybe those are the guys you're going to use to draft off of for like the flatter stages. Some guys are climbers, right? And you might need the climbers for the mountains where you're just going uphill all fucking day, just digging on those pedals but these guys could be going up a mountain for like an hour. Like, that's crazy.
That's
that's really hard, guys. Like, we're meatheads and we talk about squats and deadlifts and everything, but like, what always impressed me the most about that is like the mental acceptance of like, there is no way out. I have to suffer for the next fucking hour and a half with no break. Like, I can't stop. I can't get off. It's just like, until that's the highlight I was telling you about. It's actually like puts like the Conan, the Barbarian theme, and a couple other things. And you see Lance just like out of the saddle, just digging, going all the way up a mountain, just to try to put some time into Jan Ulrich. And it's like, wow, man, the fortitude that takes, just like, there's no way out. Like, there's no break. It's just like, I have to get to the end of the race. To me, it's just so impressive. Like, it's next level.
Do you think that there's also a certain genetic component, but how much they feel the lactic acid fatigue?
For sure.
Because I've trained clients who, let's say client A is a normal human being, and like they do some lunges and some knee extensions and their quads are burning and they're like, oh, I can keep moving the weight, but I just can't tolerate the fatigue anymore. Whereas I've had other clients do knee extensions for 50 reps and they're like, are we almost done? Like, I'm not feeling much. Like, so, some of it's mind to muscle connection and being able to activate and get in tune. But I think some people have an inherent resiliency and durability with the fatigue threshold, like the lactate threshold, like that kind of thing is just either you have it or you don't. So if you're built to be an endurance athlete, you can't always get that unless you have just a psychotic mentality where you enjoy that type of pain.
I think we said this already, but I think it's worth repeating, and how even in very particular sports that just test, say, endurance or strength or whatever, there's still like different strategies about how you could win. I believe Lance Armstrong's VO2 max, while exceptional compared to the average human, of course, okay, was not exceptional compared to other cyclists. Okay. I believe what was exceptional was his lactate threshold. Okay. So his aerobic system had a much bigger window. He could operate at very high intensities before the hydrogen ions that we call lactate, but that's kind of incorrect, are building up in your muscles. And also his ability to shuttle that fatigue out was superior to that of his opposition. So like, if he's climbing and all of a sudden he's got a good flat stretch, okay, his body is better at taking the hydrogen ions out of the legs before the next climb, okay, where other guys might be better for like a longer, straighter output. They can provide more oxygen to the muscles. For whatever reason, he had a superior lactate threshold. That seems to be like the book on Lance in terms of like exceptional physiological, like genetic gifts, I think that's kind of it in that case.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say this. I want to tell you one interesting anecdote because you brought up doping. And I want to say this because this is, I think, important for our audience to understand. Obviously, everybody was doping. We all know this. Okay. But Lance Armstrong did have an unfair advantage, but it's not what people think. So Lance is probably my favorite athlete of all time. And we could do a whole podcast about him in and of itself. And maybe one day we will. Okay. But it's undeniable that much, and I think LeBron James has the same kind of thing going on. Michael Jordan probably did, because you have to understand, you get this, Ian. Lance Armstrong was in that category. Lance Armstrong was in the same category as a LeBron James, or at that
of all time.
I mean,
sure,
he was
in that conversation.
Huge. He was huge also as a national figure, international figure, huge. Okay. So he wins the Tour de France in 99. Okay. And becomes an overnight sensation because he already had the Livestrong Foundation. Like, he had an incredible story. He literally beat cancer, was on death's door, and comes back to win. You cannot take it away from him. It's no matter what you say, he did it. But in 99, a lot of the best riders were suspended from something called the Festina affair that occurred in '98, where the cops like arrested a bunch of teams that had PEDs like in their trucks and whatnot.
Damn.
Okay, so he becomes super successful. In 2000, now it's like, okay, Lance, he's now all the big guys are back. Like, could he really do it? He does it again. Okay. At this point, though, he's so famous that he actually has an unfair advantage in terms of infrastructure. So if you were a professional cyclist who's trying to dethrone Lance, you don't have nearly as much money or sway as he does. So you are like, you might have like your PEDs like in like the camper that the team is driving around in. Well, guess what? You get pulled over and you get searched. It's over. It's a wrap. Okay. What Lance did at one point in time was they knew that a drug test was coming for EPO. Okay. His coach knew that it was coming. So we had them stop using EPO, which helps your body produce more red blood cells. Okay. And they switched to more old tech doping, which was blood bags, putting blood back in your body on the course of the race. Okay. Now,
like removing your blood, or is it donor blood, or is it only your blood?
It's your blood. You take your own blood out months before. Okay. Now, obviously, this requires infrastructure. You can't have blood like sitting on your fucking pavement in the summer and put it like you're gonna die. Like this is
have like medical freezers, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And
what did he do? He rented a house on the route of the Tour de France this one particular year. Like a true bro, he got one of his dudes from back home to live in this house. His sole purpose was to basically maintain the medical fridge that had the entire team's blood in it.
Wow.
Okay.
It's crafty.
He had a private jet. The private jet didn't have to go through security. He could fly from the US to Europe with mass quantities of drugs. Okay.
Blood plane and drug plane. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is what really made me like Lance more. The first year, okay, so he didn't have access to any of this. He hired, I cannot wait to see your reaction to this, okay? He hired his gardener, like his buddy from back home in Texas, and they called him Moto Man. And he did the Tour de France under the cover of night on a motorcycle with a backpack filled with drugs. So, like, what? Because they couldn't get caught with them. So, because we're searching them, they're searching the hotel rooms, like it's complete. They're trying to clean the sport up, and he's like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna throw a couple G's to my psycho friend from back home." Like that guy, we all got one. You know, if you're a dude, you got one guy that's like that. Like he's not as successful as you, but he'll keep some up for you. You want to take care.
He'll do some shady shit for you if you need to. You call that guy.
Put his boy over from the United States, gave him like a Yamaha motorcycle, and the dude just literally pitch black. Because the cops are looking for all this stuff, just taking the turns, backpack filled with testosterone, EPO, cortisone, like whatever they're taking, and he would like deliver it. They would do the drugs, and he would just get out of Dodge. And they would bike somewhere. He'd meet him at night, like that night of this motorcycle. Just like hold up, it's funny because you think about when you change. Like we spoke about Mariusz Pudzianowski last week, right? World's strongest man. Goes lighter with events, you select for a different athlete, right?
Of course.
If the NBA lowered the hoop 2 feet, you'd be selecting for a different type of athlete, right? There's a different type of person might be successful in the sport. So like when you have a sport that you have to do drugs to win, and then you make really stringent like drug testing, or like the cops are just literally arresting people, like pulling them over and illegally searching them. Well, in America it would be illegal. In Europe, it's probably just game on. Okay. You start to select for like bigger risk takers. You know, like guys who are psychos are going to be the ones like, fuck yeah, I'm still going to get the drugs. Just get Jimmy from back home and throw him on his Honda. Like it's, you know,
Jimmy,
like, you know,
because what's on the line though for those guys? Is it a lot? Can you make a lot of money in that sport? Like sometimes, you know, besides taking the risk of being shamed like Lance Armstrong was, or being arrested and, you know, charged with crimes for having drugs, what's to gain? Like he who is so famous and so wealthy at some point, I'm sure, because of all his, you know, notoriety from the sport, but is there a big purse that you get from the Tour de France? Are those things like,
he changed,
is it mostly sponsorships?
Yeah. Before him, I don't know that it was as big of a deal, but also keep in mind, this is such a great topic, dude. It's such a bigger deal in Europe. Like they're
True.
more
Fair
famous in Europe. You know what I mean? Like it is a regional thing. Like so, yeah, I'm sure there's more prestige and money in Europe than there is in the United States for winning the Tour de France. Lance just had such a crazy story that it just became this transcendent thing. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, obviously why he became so famous. And also, I personally suspect, dude, if he was not American, I don't think they ever would have caught him because they hated that an American was dominating a European sport.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, the French media hated him, and he loved confrontation so much that he gave it right back to him, and that's what fucked him. If he did like Chael Sonnen recently went on a podcast, like one of those comedian podcasts, and was like, I go to the same doctor as LeBron James. He takes testosterone, human growth hormone, and EPO. LeBron James didn't say anything. Lance would have sued him for telling the truth.
Okay.
Fair
enough.
You got some sack on you, like to sue someone for telling the truth. Because sooner or later, you do that enough, you piss off enough people, that you did it. Like there's evidence, like you did the thing. They're going to catch you, And okay, one last thing about PEDs, because I know that's kind of a little bit more my element.
It's always a fascinating topic to me. I don't know.
So one drug I've always wanted to try, but I definitely will never try. I would love to use EPO, as I do think it has anti-aging properties. If I could get it administered by doctor legally, I think it has a lot of good properties. But I read a book that was written by Tyler Hamilton, who was one of Lance's teammates. They had a falling out. Tyler went on to become, I think, an Olympic champion, and was like very much in the discussion to win the Tour de France. Lost because of a bad blood bag. The blood went bad. He put it in him and he got really sick, had to drop out of the race, almost died. Okay.
Oh, shit.
But he said the drug that he felt gave him the best boost was cortisone. And I'm like thinking about, well, how is that possible? And he just said it's an endurance sport. It numbs you out so much that you could fucking push to a completely different level.
Cortisone is usually site injected for a certain area. Is there a systemic version where you can basically disperse it through your entire body, or the areas that you would be really?
As a lifter, that's never a drug that I would have considered. You know what I mean? In terms of like PEDs, you're used to hearing about it as like, my knee is messed up, I'm taking a cortisone shot. But these guys would take it like prior to a race. And I remember Tyler Hamilton saying like, it just increased his pain threshold so much that, he could push to a different level. And then you think about it, like the pain threshold, at some point, the pain is your body telling you, like, stop doing this. Like, this is bad. Okay. You wonder, like, how much worse it is for you to really dig like that. Because these guys get osteopenic.
Your body's signs, basically.
Yeah.
And push through anyway. Yeah.
Yes. Like, it's pretty crazy because a lot of these guys lose bone density on these tours.
Okay.
Because you also have to stay light. You can't eat that much. It is a thrust
like
to
jockeys,
weight ratio.
Yeah. You have to keep a certain body weight. Yeah.
Crazy thing, But I've always found that fascinating. The different types of drugs that these guys take and how EPO was the one thing you needed. Like it was basically shown to be a literal 10% improvement on your endurance. So like if you had the same level of fitness, you take EPO, when it kicks in, your time or whatever will improve, or your power output will improve by 10% just by taking the drug. Now, the difference between first place and last place in the Tour de France is 5%.
So
what does that tell you?
Yeah. Everyone's on.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
But you can't win. It's impossible. Yeah.
Unless there's a certain way for them to completely clean up the sport, but you're always going to have somebody, like you said, who'll take the risk and cheat anyway. The dark side of EPO, I have a quick story, a very unfortunate story. There was a great American strongman named Mike Jenkins. I had the pleasure to meet him. He was a class act. He was a fantastic guy.
Both around Long Island.
I went to his gym opening when he was really big. He won a big contests. He was really probably going to be one of the greats, I think, ever, if he was on the same path that if he stayed in the path that he was on. And he opened his CrossFit gym when CrossFit was really big back then as his business to support his efforts in strongman. It was great. And strongman, unlike powerlifting is the one rep maximum, so not very cardiovascularly intense. Where strongman, you have to carry things, you have the plane pulls, you have to do these things that can take 90 seconds and can take, even though 90 seconds seems like a joke duration compared to a multi-day event like a Tour de France, you do have to have a certain level of conditioning and be 400 pounds. So what happened with Mike Jenkins was he took EPO, which many of them do, to get the conditioning he needed to compete at the level he needed to. But apparently, from what I'm aware of with EPO, is if you don't use this excess blood that your body is producing unnaturally from the drug, it makes your blood much thicker and harder to pump through your blood vessels, arteries, capillaries. So what happened was, sadly, a lot of cyclists I've heard will get up at the middle of the night and just cycle for a little while, just to burn off the energy in the blood and get that oxygenated blood out and cycle it. No pun intended. But he went to sleep on, I forget the year, maybe 2014, Thanksgiving Eve, and never woke up. And his blood became so thick and thickened from the EPO, in conjunction to his heart probably being enlarged, because he was a dinosaur of a human being.
Monster.
Plus, a lot of the testosterone and the strength-producing drugs, they grow tissue without discriminating. So they'll grow, your biceps and your back and your lats and all that, but they also grow your heart and the smooth muscle that, will unfortunately be contributing to an early demise.
This picture here, left finger, is me with Mike Jenkins. This is me with Donnie Thompson, okay?
Oh.
In this picture, I am 6'2", 245 pounds.
Yeah. Not a small man. A small man.
At the size of that guy.
He's a dinosaur.
If someone said, "Oh, that guy weighs," meaning Mike Jenkins weighs 250, and this guy weighs 180, you'd believe it.
Yeah.
Okay, like this is insane how big this guy is. That's one of the people that when I met him, I drove him around Long Island in my Nissan Sentra, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
He shakes your hand and he tries not to hurt you.
He had like a bushel of bananas for a hand. Like he had a large mitt, like a paw.
Unbelievable. I didn't know that. I don't know if you got some inside info about that. I had not heard that. So I don't know who broke that
strongman
news.
Community. Yeah.
I had also heard that that's what killed Jesse Morunde.
Really? And he was not that big of a guy.
He was a world's competitor. He was not an Arnold Classic competitor from that community.
To Mariusz Pudzianowski at Worlds.
Yes.
And he was on the cusp. He could have won one. Yeah. Definitely could have won one.
But I had heard that I had a friend that was into strongman. I had a strongman friend before I met you. And he was same thing, big on the forums. This is pre-social media. And he had a couple connections with some guys I'll name off air. I don't want to blow anything up.
Sure.
That had basically said, like he was using a ton of EPO. The thing is that EPO is a very safe drug when administered by doctors for physically fit people. Okay. But you have to understand, yes. But when you are even 250 with hypertension, Mike Jenkins was 400 pounds.
Yes.
I mean, this is not an exaggeration.
6'7".
Yeah. Okay. When you are that big, okay, and you're on that much drugs, your blood pressure is already probably way too high. Okay. And as someone who's taken PEDs, I can tell you when you take things that aren't EPO, your hematocrit always goes up. Your body produces more red blood cells just from taking testosterone. Period. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And really, that's an unavoidable side effect. People tell you to give blood, but the reality is that triggers a chemical response in your body, which will then overproduce and get you right back to where you were, if not further, which is bad. So all you could do is do your cardio and make sure you stay hydrated to thin your blood out and probably take blood pressure medication, but the hematocrit's going to go up. When you're 400 pounds and you're trying to increase your crit, as they would say, your hematocrit to that extent, it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem. Now, Lance Armstrong was one of the bigger cyclists. I think he was almost $160, which is huge for a cyclist.
It's a big guy.
Nowadays,
in that world,
they're $130, and they had to get smaller because they cracked down on the drug so much more. You couldn't just be like a brick shithouse just putting out watts. You had to cut corners, less drugs, smaller people, lighter bikes. These are all things that are in the equation. But in the case of Mike, by the way, such a nice guy.
So nice.
Such a nice guy.
What a great guy. Jeez.
But that's just, yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of time. In fact, on the topic of Mike Jenkins, you were there when this happened. My old boss held a Mike Jenkins like deadlift only meet.
Competed in it, yeah.
Me too, yeah. And that was my first time. My first time trying to deadlift 700. I pulled 665 and blew my back out and shit my pants. Literally. Okay.
I try. Yes.
And it was the most humiliating, awful car ride home. I couldn't even like turn my head to like look at the mirror. I smelled like literal fecal matter. It was awful. Like I got home and looked in the mirror and I was like, Eric, like you got like, what's
going on with your life?
Yeah, like it was dark. It was
Reconsider
dark.
some things.
Yeah.
And well, let's wrap this one up. This was fantastic. Yeah, that was really fascinating. About I didn't know you had such a wealth of knowledge about cycling and endurance sports. So that's pretty cool.
I'm a junkie for information. I'm an extremist, so whenever I want to learn something, I go all in on it. But also, like, dude, I love history, and he is like an impactful, like, social figure. And like, look, I also I love politics, I love philosophy, I love history, and I'm fascinated with how, I don't know if this is an American thing, if this is just a human thing, if it's a Western thing, if it's a white person thing, I have no idea. But I'm fascinated with how much we like to tear people down. And I'll just say this, as I know you got to get out of Dodge. Like, what always bothered me about the treatment of Lance, like, yes, he was a dick, no question about it, and he'll admit that, okay. But like, his foundation was unique in that it was not something that was not money being given to research for cancer. Okay. It was being given to patient care to increase the quality of life of a person who was undergoing chemotherapy. Okay. As an example, like, there are people that will tell you Livestrong was a big pusher on like telling men to bank their sperm or women to bank their eggs before undergoing radiation because they might be infertile, maybe for life after the fact. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And Lance was the last person to see a lot of people before they died. Okay. And that story, his story, got hundreds of thousands, if not, I don't know what the stats are for cancer, but in that time window, got so many people through. And it's like, I put myself in his position. You never think you're going to be that famous. Think about it. You're a cyclist. You don't think you're going to be on the level of fucking Michael Jordan?
No.
You
would never Illustrated cover, that
maybe,
type of fame.
Maybe.
Sure.
Okay. And so you're totally unprepared for it psychologically, right? Like, he would have never thought that he would not be able to walk down the street in Texas where he's from. Like, you would never think that. Like, that's not how the sport works. But the soil for this growth was so fertile because of the story, because he had already been doing the activism. He wins. Now, you also know that everyone in the sport is dirty. You have to do drugs. You're doing the normal thing. Okay.
Even the playing field. It's not like you are cheating everyone, but how it looks in the tabloids, like, people are so quick to criticize people for something that they don't truly understand, but then not give any credit for all the noble work and humanitarian work that he is doing. Yeah. Where's that credit? Like, nobody wants to give credit. People just want to criticize, and completely turn a blind eye to all the positive things that he's doing to change the world. So, I get it.
I'll just say this. This is when I really kind of became a fan, is like, okay, so you become so famous, you had none of the infrastructure in place. You didn't have like a press team or like, $1 billion agents. You had none of this stuff set up. And before you know it, you're on Letterman. And for our younger audience, back in the day, that was a big fucking deal. Being on, it was a huge deal. Okay.
The main talk show that you'll be,
Everyone sees this. Okay. And you know that you're doing what all of your competitors are doing. Okay. Everyone is basically saying, if you did this and you cheated, it's worthless, which is not true. Okay.
No.
And it's an even more impressive feat because you came back from cancer of your lungs, by the way, which is like what you
directly involved.
Yeah. Okay. And then before you know it, you've inherited this source of hope for millions of people in the world. And I put myself in this position and I'm like, I think I would have lied too.
Of course.
I probably wouldn't I don't think I would have sued people for telling the truth. I would want to think that I would have been a little more tactful than that.
Fair enough.
But like, what are you going to do? Like, people are admiring you. And it's not just like, oh, he jumps high like Michael Jordan or something. Like, you came back from a deadly, debilitating disease to achieve more greatness than you'd accomplished prior to it. Like, people are staking their hopes and dreams that I could be the exception to the rule, just like this person. And the reality is, like, you just did what everybody else was doing, you know? And he was too aggressive, but like, what are you going to say? And that's why I started reading about him. And then from there, I started reading more about cycling, but also, like, if you want to get good at understanding strength, right, you would study strongman powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, right? Like, if you want to study endurance, that's one of the things you study is cycling, because also there's different types of races. There's single day racers who are sprinters. There's multi-day tours. There's all these different things. So to me, if you really are interested in human performance, cycling is a fascinating thing, because there's just so much to energy systems and how they work and what produces a great athlete and a great champion, the mental aspect, the doping aspect, like all this other stuff. And okay, now I swear I'll stop talking after this. It's also
keep it coming.
It's also the best source of data for like conditioning methods. Like, you could actually measure like watts. It's not just like you get on an elliptical and you try to get to a target heart rate, which works. Like, cycling, you're literally measuring like watts per kilo. Like, I know that I'm getting better because I can keep the same power output for a longer period of time. So there's tangible measurements in cycling for what works for conditioning and what doesn't. And there's just so much more data because of it.
Would you say it's the most measurable of all kind of cardio and endurance? Because you can, let's say if you're a mountaineer and you have to hike mountains, it's very hard to measure the output, besides your heart rate. Whereas on a bicycle, there are stationary bikes that you can measure the direct output, and there are stationary bikes made for those guys that are exactly structured like their bikes would be on the street. So it seems like it's the most trackable, most measurable type of endurance athlete.
I think so. And I think that's why there's so much data that people use for writing conditioning programs, myself included, use stuff that comes from the cycling world, because there's less guesswork. Like in MMA or jiu-jitsu, like, yes, an advanced athlete knows when they feel better on the mat when they don't, but heavier opponent changes output. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like different rule set, as we discussed, changes output. You wind up in just a different position. Okay, it changes output. Whereas if you're getting someone better and putting them on a bike, like, you're just going to be able to measure their power output. And on top of that, because there's a controlled nature to it, like, they would do things where, like, Lance Armstrong used to do this. Like, you would sprint up a 1 kilometer mountain. Okay. And then immediately have someone test the lactate in your blood.
Really?
Yeah.
So draw blood as soon as you're done with that. They draw blood
just like a finger prick or something or whatever.
Okay.
To immediately test, like, okay, last time you did this, you did the same time, but your lactate was X amount of millimoles. Okay. Now 3 weeks later, you have less lactate. Or in this case, the more lactate, so lactate actually shuttles the fatigue out of your system. So it would actually be more lactate. I believe it's the appropriate thing. Regardless, we have tangible measurements of your conditioning is improving. It's not just time, right? It's power. Yeah. We have access to all this stuff. So I think if you're a nerd, it's a good thing to study, because there's just so much data there,
Absolutely. I would say to people with fitness, with conditioning, with strength, if you come into a training and you don't know the rules to the game, it's like, hey, let's go play football, like American football. Let's play football. I'm not going to tell you the rules, though. You've never played. You have no idea. I'm going to beat the hell out of you. I'm going to own you, because you have no idea what the rules are.
Yeah.
So with conditioning, with dieting, with weight loss and strength, you have to be taught the rules by someone, whether it's your own research and you follow some good stuff, or you listen to this podcast and you learn some cool stuff. You have to understand the rules of the game to be successful and to make your journey from point A to point B as a straight line as possible, instead of it being, all over the place and, back and forth and setbacks. So it's important to understand what it takes so you at least have a fighting shot.
I agree. And I want to set the stage for next week, because you've got a great story that will fit really well with the conditioning and strength stuff. Next week, I'm just going to set the table. I'm just going to actually bring a cup of coffee. I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm just going to let you talk. Because you brought up Mike Jenkins. I want you to tell the story of competing in the CrossFit Strongman competition you did. Okay.
All right.
And like to our audience's point, the importance of knowing the rules and being properly trained. Because I think Ian did his own personal Tour de France about 10 years ago that he may still have
one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah,
actually, short of like emotional and tragic things that happened to me. Physically, one of the most traumatic experiences. Yeah, we'll get into it. I would love to.
All right, guys, I had a great time this week. Ian, you're the man. My camera seems to be working. This is amazing. We love technology.
Yes, we're dialing in.
Guys, have a great week. You'll be hearing from us on Instagram. This is the Iron Road signing off, friends.
Thanks for listening.